So without further ado, we'll start off. I've known one of these guests for probably more than a dozen years. Oh, that would be Tom Duffy right here. And so I told him I wouldn't say this because it's really below the belt, but we'll do age before beauty. And we'll go with Tom Duffy. Billboard Magazine Special Features Editor. Okay, so the profiles and more, all of these things go across his desk. The assignments, the reporters about to have nervous breakdowns, deadlines, the subject of the features that maybe you're having second thoughts. God knows what scenarios he's seen. Enough from me. From Billboard Magazine, I introduce Tom Duffy.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to start with an updated version of an old cartoon that some of the veterans in the room might remember. Guy's sitting in front of his keyboard, and he's got a total blank. He's got dogs at his feet, and he's on the porch of his house. He's got dogs in the window, and there's dogs in the yard. And he's just staring at the keyboard, like trying to figure out, what to write. And his wife comes out, looks at him and says, "Write about dogs." Now the point is, you write about what you know, you write about what's around you. And there is nothing more pervasive, I think, than pop culture. I used to be a political writer. I felt at a certain point that pop culture was having a greater impact than politicians on the future of the country. No great brainstorm that. And that is how I directed my career. I will tell you guys that I think it is easier than ever to get started in this business. It is harder than ever to sustain a career in it. The difference between the people who start and the people who sustain is professional training. Why is it easier to get started? Because effectively you can create your own clips. You can blog, so many outlets out there. It's harder than ever because there is so much free stuff out there, you got to figure out how to make it pay. We were talking earlier about the fact that so many people are out there DIYing it, but you really need to know standards, practices, expectations of professionals in order to get to the point where people are going to pay you to do this. And one of the other reasons it's so fascinating is that this is an absolute game-changing time in journalism. Journalism, people wondering, will it survive? The way people wondered, music business, will it survive? It'll survive because of you guys. I mean, the funniest damn thing in the last 10 years has been all sorts of conferences about the future of journalism where people like me are sitting down trying to figure it out. We're not going to figure it out. You guys are going to try to figure it out. Billboard Magazine is primarily known for the Billboard charts. It's primarily known for most of its 100 plus years as a business magazine, what they call B2B, business to business. This website, now 11 million uniques each month. We are a major music consumer brand. And at the same time, Tom, can you go to billboard.biz? We have an entirely parallel site that serves the business. No great surprise, South by Southwest, the top of the news these days. But you really need to know what the needs of the publication you're pitching are. And one way to do that is just be a consumer of media. Just read. Try to figure out what is the difference, and maybe we'll be able to talk about this between what Billboard's doing, what Vibe is doing, what EW is doing, what others. I'll give one plug for, I think, a good resource, but Avon Guild within the Media Bistro site. Avon Guild has an ongoing feature. How do I pitch Essence? Which they just did. How do I pitch this magazine or that magazine? There are dozens of magazines on there, and everybody's got a different angle. So it's a way in. So that's just my start, and I'm going to hand it off.
So Tom, thank you for those introductory comments. Professor Saran,
oh, hi. Yes.
Please introduce our second guest.
Hi, I met Daytwan Thomas from Vibe magazine. He's the editorial director at a New York Association of Black Journalism event. And he's a Queens native. He started at Vibe as an intern and basically, worked his way up through different publications, but most recently he's worked besides Vibe, globalgrind.com. He's a founder of a men's lifestyle magazine called King Magazine. And so I know that he has a lot that he wants to share with you. He sent some copies of the most recent issue of Vibe with Nicki Minaj on the cover, and he's going to tell you what it takes to break into Vibe magazine.
How you doing?
All right.
It's wild every time we do like one of these type of panels. I'm always, oh man, it's like so many things I want to say at one time, you know. But I guess I'll just start with like real quick on my career. I started as an intern at Vibe, and this was in '96. And in '96, similar to what Tom was saying about it being the easiest time to break into the industry now, there were so few outlets to have your voice heard if you were typing about dogs. You know what I mean? So the dogs for me were hip hop, were rappers really. And I just immersed myself in the culture and just always wanted to, thank you, just always wanted to, even like in high school, just at lunchtime, we're talking about all the rappers of the moment and whose opinion was right about which rapper and all that stuff, and just battling on who knew the most about a particular song. And I think that's what it starts with if you want to be a reviewer or whatever. And there was an English teacher that just kind of, he saw these arguments happening all the time in the lunchroom and was like, why don't you guys write it out?
Yeah.
Why don't you write it out like that? And we would do like reviews on different hip hop albums and things like that, and we all pretty much got pretty good at it. And I figured like, hey, this is what those people in the source do. This is what the people in Vibe do. I want to do what they're doing because I feel like this person is wrong. My opinion is right, you know. And I think that's what most people do right now. Like they don't believe in only what the news has to say, or only what a particular person in a high profile seat has to say. They believe in what they have to say. So that's why you have, you know, all these blogs and all these different companies that are just exploding. Like Instagram. Instagram is your vision of a certain block or what's going on around you. It's not only what someone else has put up. And you can put your spin on it, things like that. So I say all that to say that there's a full circle that's happened to me. And writing has provided that. Just toiling away at staying true to the art form and staying true to providing people with a solid opinion a lot of times as well, and how I see pop culture and hip hop and all the rest. Since I was an intern at Vibe, I just started different magazines like King, like Rides, Hip Hop Soul, which was a mesh of R&B and hip hop together. I did a magazine like that as well. Worked with Russell Simmons and helping to relaunch Global Grind, which is his kind of hip hop take on pop culture. And then just making my way back at Vibe. So to see myself in the Tupac issue where they, they honored him after he passed, that was the first time I ever saw my name in print, and it was under intern. Now my name is under editorial director. But even with that huge jump, my goals are still the same. I'm still the kid that there's a new rapper out. We were talking about Merle High School recently. There's a new rapper out. His name is Joey Badass. It's a bad name. It's a horrible name. But he's probably one of the more incredible artists that I've heard recently. He's 17 years old. He just turned 17. And I'm still excited about that. So that every once in a while, if I question like, oh man, should I be on this track? Or should I just only, write about a certain aspect still that I was writing about when I was like 21? An artist like him comes around and assures me that this is the reason why I'm doing it. And I'm just happy that Vibe is still around, because at one point it looked like it wasn't going to be around. But
we were talking about that. I've worked at this magazine for more years than I want to admit in this room. But I've worked for 6 different companies.
Right.
Why? Because the magazine has been bought and sold and bought and sold, and as has Vibe.
Yeah, and we're under a new management right now. Magic Johnson, he owns it. Ron Burkle, the billionaire dude, for Kaiba. And it's just amazing that we're able to preserve the institution. You know, it's a place that helped hone my skills and gave me a start. So I'm just happy to keep it going and just being a part of it.
Thank you very much. So we have editors, we have editorial directors, we have freelancer who's making his career in film at the same time. So we have a little bit of a spectrum here, and that's our freelancer is Neil Drumming, who comes from Entertainment Weekly, where he used to be an editor, former editor there, and also he'll later on in the talk and give you an introduction now, has a short feature that you'll probably be launching soon, right? So Neil, go ahead, Neil Drumming.
Yeah, it's all pretty confusing because nobody actually knows what I do. Just to be, to be pretty clear, I was at Entertainment Weekly for about 6 years, and I was only an editor there for about the first 1 or 2 years because I wasn't actually a very good editor. So I will speak to you more as a writer, and that's what I've been doing for most of my life. The period at EW, let me take it back sort of to the beginning because I like the way you sort of said where you came from. I got started writing actually. I was living in DC. I didn't even go to journalism school, so you can see how sort of unorthodox my career is. I was a film major, a screenwriting major, and after I graduated, I didn't know what to do because I didn't have any money and I couldn't make a film and I didn't know how to get into the business. So I kind of bounced around Florida, and then I ended up in DC, and I got a job at the Washington City paper, which is like the Village Voice for DC, and I was doing listings, just like this party is at this club and this party is at that club, and I had such a sort of like passion and resentment of the people who were writing about music because I was like, you don't know what you're talking about, that album's not that good. So I just kept saying stuff like that in arguments with people, and then finally the editors were like, you should do a piece on this little. So you start with like a little blurb, and then you go on. And it was actually a really good crew down there. The City paper, my editor-in-chief at that time was David Carr, who is now the New York Times, whatever he is. Have you seen the movie?
Media mogul.
Yeah, whatever. And Ta-Nehisi Coates was my best friend back then. Wow. Who now works at The Atlantic.
Monday New York Times, David Carr column. Read it every week. Just amazing. Read
What's
it
the
online.
Movie? Page 1, the New York Times movie. He's the asshole in that movie. So yeah, it was a good place to get a start, and honestly I think that's the thing I probably would want to talk the most about is like, no matter what you do, like it's really important to get a good foundation, like start writing and start finding your voice somewhere where they let you do that. That's the most important thing. Like City Paper was kind of like, do whatever you want, like do what you want, we trust your opinion, and then we'll help you make it good. And that was the best experience I've ever had. It was years ago, and it's still probably some of the best writing I've ever done in my life. Yeah. And so I feel like, finding a place where, and I don't know how you do that now because it's changed. It used to be that, like weeklies, city weeklies were a good place to sort of find, work and to sort of start. I don't know, I'm assuming it's blogs and the internet. It's changed. But whatever it is, wherever you can get grounded and start writing and really dig in, that seems like the most important place to me. That's your beginning.
So with those introductory comments, we could go back to what Tom Duffy from Billboard might want to add about what he's doing now, what brought him to the point where he is right now, and other comments that I'm sure you have up your sleeve. Maybe you want to throw some questions at them. It's up to you now. We can have a sort of a freewheeling discussion, and don't be shy and get the hands up so we can have the rest of this whole till 2 o'clock period to have a dialogue, a back and forth. But Tom, go ahead.
I'm going to throw out a question to you guys, and maybe self-evident. How many people in this room have a Facebook account? How many of you would want some editor you're looking to work with see everything on your Facebook account? All right. Therefore,
there's always 3 or 4 who don't
that's
care.
right. That's right. But there's just no question. Networking is as important now as it ever was, always will be. Social networking is absolutely the way that it all comes together. But I'd urge you guys, if you have not used LinkedIn, create yourself a profile, as simple as you want, so that when you meet people in a business setting, you have a way to connect with them online that is professional. So just a thought. And you were talking about the arguments in the lunchroom, those arguments happen now in print all the time. You can go onto so many different sites and start developing your voice in dialogue with other people. That's what I find so fascinating about the way to get out there is you will be recognized as a voice if you are out there just tweeting, just blogging, just doing it. But then you got to make that jump to get paid for it. And building this profile, building this network is the way to do it. I was just sharing with Neil that I worked for Entertainment Weekly and got my first assignment by running into a guy in the New York City subway. We were both going to the same gig downtown. There are so many ways in this city particularly to connect with people, but you can do it on those two sites online.
Definitely.
Those two avenues online.
I was going to mention networking in my intro because that was the reason why I was able to kind of segue into Vibe. I used to just run around with different DJs. I'm actually from Brooklyn, but I live in Queens now for so many years. And I looked up with this DJ crew called the Executioners, Rob Swift. They're like really technical battle DJs. And I just fell in love with the art form. And I would just run around with them. And I was like, what's the best way to get in the club? DJs are in the club, so I'm going to go with the DJ. Because at least I'm going to get in. So that's how I started going to all the different clubs around the city. And I actually met Rob at an NYU panel like this. I was on the other side. He was speaking. And I just went up to him after and was like, yo, my man is better than you. I know a DJ that's better. Because I knew that was the only way that I would be able to get his attention. Everyone was going to ask, like, hey, I got songs to play. And I was like, no, someone's better than you. And he was like, oh, who? I was like, him. And my boy was like, talking about?
Dejuan, you remind me of a great line that comes from a guy I called my rabbi through the years. Dave Marsh. Dave Marsh has been called the first rock critic to go platinum. He was Bruce Springsteen's biographer. And he's got a line that I've used throughout the years, and just take it, remember if you think it's worth it. God helps those who hype themselves.
It's so true. And just learning from that experience and going around networking with different people, I met a couple of people that told me about Vibe doing some stuff, and I would always go online when I was over at Baruch College. I would always be in the library, online. Everyone else was running around doing craziness. And I saw one day that they had an internship available on the site. Hardly anyone does that. The way that they did it, they had like a big splash cloud. And I was like, what? Clicked on it. I had a number pop up. I only had like 75 cents. Phone, that's when we had pay phones. I ran over to the pay phone and I called it straight. I left my books, everything. It just went straight to the phone. And the guy was like, yo, just come through when you can. Like, I'll be here on Saturday. Saturday was my birthday. I was like, yeah, I had all kind of plans. I was like, man, all right, I'll come through. He said, it's going to be like 300 people here, though. So I suggest you get here early. I'm like, all right, cool. Saturday comes, I'm all dressed up. I go. He's not there. Security's like, nobody's here on a Saturday. What are you talking about? They had beepers and stuff. I remember his number in the beeper. I'm like, you call this dude. He just so happened to be walking in the building, picks up the phone. He looks out the window and he's like, oh, I see you. You're outside, right out here.
That's great.
I mean, like, all these little moments. And I go upstairs, and it's just me. And I was like, I thought you said 300 people. He's like, nah, I just wanted to see if he was going to be scared. Who was that? My man, Greg Bishop.
I did a little bit about it, too.
Yeah, Greg Bishop did that to me.
Talk a little bit about how you take best advantage of an internship and what you should do.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you, my experience as an intern was very different than probably most because I got the internship on my own. I didn't go through my school. So there was no college credit. It was just me. The school, I was at Baruch, which was on 23rd and Lex. Vibe just so happened to be on 32nd and Lex. So I would, even between classes, I would run 10 blocks, see what's going on. Did anybody come through? Who came through that I can interview? What's going on? Okay, I got to go to class, but I'll be right back. That was my internship. So I just took every moment as like, hey, I need to be here. And I did that for like a year and a half. While I was there, another crazy moment is how I got to Double XL. One of the other interns ran into the editor for Double XL magazine, and he was too afraid to call him. He had his card, and I was like, give me that card. You not gonna call him? I called him right there. He was like, meet me on Saturday. It was the same thing. It was like the same. I was like, yo, this cannot be happening. I ended up talking to Reginald Dennis from the source, and he went over to Double XL for like 3 hours straight. Neither one of us got up, and I'm thinking like, he didn't like me because he didn't look at my clips. He was like, oh no, I already have like story ideas for you. But the best I can do about an internship now is a young woman by the name of Adele. I think her name is in this issue right now. She was our intern last semester. And she had to work through some hard times. Like our office was in Harlem. It was real crazy. It was super hood. It was wild. She's Asian. She came through. She was just like, I want to be here. Worked her tail off. And then next thing you know, she's now an editorial assistant at the magazine. And I had a really good talk with her yesterday at Starbucks. And she was just going through everything that she broke through to get to that point, and she impressed every editor. And our editor-in-chief is just so, I'm sorry, Tom, but our editor-in-chief is so tough with Jermaine as far as like copying what he wants, as far as the voice, and she was able to hop over every obstacle with that. And she wasn't even a journalism major, which was wild because the other kids were. And it was just the unorthodox way of her thinking and attacking edit, and copying stories and ideas and just being there that made her the one that made it through to actually get a spot on the team.
You know, I'm curious about the other two guys as well. I mean, I think one of the important things that students should take out of this program and take going into the field is that sense of what you need to bring to get it done. What level of desire you need to bring, that level of commitment, that going the extra mile that somebody else isn't going to go. It's hard for us to really communicate that sometimes in a classroom environment and to have them really realize how important just sheer desire is.
Yep.
So I was wondering if all three of you might be able to share times in your careers where a certain mindset, a certain approach made all the difference.
This is a short story. It's not that long. It has to do, for me, a lot of it is about like, I really believe in voice and like vision, like setting yourself apart by what you want to write about and how well you do it. But I remember we were at EW, and the big score is to get Will Smith, and he was coming out with I Am Legend that year, and that was in the summer. But he had Hitch like in the winter or something, and so we were like. I was like, I want to do this Will Smith story because there's all this stuff about how Will Smith goes overseas and promotes his films and he does what other black actors won't do. And my editors were like, great, let's do it, let's save it for I Am Legend. And I was like, no, save it, we'll do it for Hitch because, I'm sorry, it wasn't Hitch, I'm totally on 7 pounds. Yeah. So whatever, I think it was 7 pounds. So the notion was, get him on something that he cares about. Get him ready to really, really talk, not just something that everybody's going to chase him down for. And I had to sort of fight for it because they're like, well, it's not going to be as big a movie as I Am Legend's going to be huge. Like, let's just wait for that. But at the end of the day, I was right just because of the way I wanted to position the story, which was, how does Will Smith make his movies work overseas, which is a whole conversation about why black movies don't work overseas. That's a long, drawn-out discussion. But I ended up getting to go down. I went down to Baltimore, spent like 3 hours with the guy. Like, it was one of the best interviews I ever got to do. But it was just because everybody wanted to do Will Smith, but you have to look at it your own way. You have to find your way of telling the story. And so I think I'm a big advocate. I can't say this enough of individuality. I really believe in voice and perspective, and I think that takes you. I mean, hard work is given. That goes without saying. Industriousness, hard work is important for any job, but I feel like with writing, it's one of those things that still comes from you. And so if you can make people know who you are, then I think you stand out. I mean, I remember getting the first acknowledgement I got of what I do was at City Paper. I got some kind of all weekly award, and I remember the guy, it was John Dolan. You remember John Dolan, his thing? he was the editor of Spin, but he was one of the judges, and I remember he said, I always felt so grateful that he said that when I was writing about hip hop, I was not hand wringing, and I was unapologetic. And I felt, and what he was saying was I wasn't afraid to say horrible stuff about people that everybody else loved, which has been part of the defining, that's my career basically, in seeing it, saying terrible things about people that other people won't say. Like I wrote a Tupac review once that got me death threats. So in any event, so that I've had my nose broken over a story. I've been knocked out in the street, like in DC. So like, but you know, it's not that I'm an asshole. It's more that I was just trying to say what I thought, regardless of what everybody else said.
Yeah. That's passion.
I have a question about libel. How does journalists, students avoid dealing with libel when you're interviewing for art, hip hop artists, or someone?
You know, you study it. You study it so you know what the standards are. Reviewing is not going to be considered libelous. You know, for one thing, most of the time if you're writing about a performer, you're writing about a public figure. And as you know, there are different rules that apply to criticism of public figures. You know, but this is where I was saying earlier, the difference between the bloggers and the people who can actually make a living at this is professional training, is understanding the legal issues, the ethical issues, the business issues that will make it happen. Regarding the business issues, just as an aside, by the way, I've got a really good New York colleague who told me once, and I knew this guy's like, you know, purebred New York. He goes, I went to UCLA. I said, UCLA? He goes, yeah, Baruch, the University of the Cornell, Lexington Avenue. I'm going on a quick tangent. Business, you know, I keep coming back to this thing that if you guys are going to come out of this and make it your life's work, you got to figure out how to make the numbers work, you know? And one of the ways you've already done that really smart is being at CUNY. This is the first place that I looked at with my 16-year-old to go to school, because you're talking like a great, they didn't pay me to say this, a great value in education, and oh, I need a school with a good name recognition. The City University of New York, okay? You tell me better name recognition than that. So, you know, you got to figure out how the numbers work, and this is the issue. I want to say something about interning. It's important, but I don't think it's entirely essential to launch your career as an intern, and I kind of have an issue with this culture where I got to get out and I got to work for nothing to make it start. Well, you know, great if you can do that, but you don't have to. But if you do get your foot in the door as an intern, do not be shy. I got to tell you, dozens of interns have come through Billboard magazine in the years that I've been there. I can count on one hand the number who actually came up to my desk, introduced themselves, and said, what can I do? You know, I'm not going to go seek you out. I'm busy, you know. I will tell you that Billboard has an intern program that primarily recruits from J schools. So, you know, unfortunately, it's not as open to undergrads as it might be. But I interned at the New York Daily News. And I was just telling a story that I reached out to an editor who's now at the New York Times with a critique of their election coverage not long ago. And I didn't kind of tell this guy my connection to him. I just wrote as if I was another reader. And he said, Tom, it's good to hear from you. How have you done all these years? I interned for him at the New York Daily News in the late 1970s and introduced myself to him, and he had not forgotten my name. And he knew, you know, I'd not been in touch with him. But it makes a difference. Just don't be shy. But also don't feel like you got to work for nothing if it doesn't work for you.
Sure. There's an intern that we have now, Jonathan. About every hour and a half, he comes over. Need anything?
Yeah.
Good?
Yeah, do it.
Straight?
Do it.
Any kind of like transcriptions? Like he'll even say things anything just to make sure that we're aware that he's there and that he might need something or he's already finished. Like he always checks in. And that's super rare. Super rare.
I actually have a theory that, shoot me down on this. I've seen with younger journalists a reluctance, because so much communication is done digitally, a reluctance to communicate even over the phone, you know, just be in people's faces. I can't tell you the number of times somebody will say, well, I reached out to that source and didn't hear back from them. You emailed them? You know, call them up on the phone.
David Carr did that page one, remember, like, phone.
Emails are the easiest thing in the world to ignore.
Yep.
They are the easiest thing.
If you're banking your research on that,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna win.
Yeah, when you apply for jobs, you're probably going to be doing it digitally.
Yeah.
Figure out how to find your way through that voicemail and leave voicemails at 9 o'clock in the morning, you know?
But just to go back to the value of networking, me and Dave Klein know each other for a long time.
Yes, indeed.
If you were to go to Facebook and see how many people we have in common, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 400 people at least. Yeah. We've crisscrossed paths probably a million times.
At least, and especially the fact that networking for me is part of my job. Like I've built it in. Like certain events, I know some editors probably now that have been in the game, like this year makes 15 for me. They're like, oh, I'm not going to that, it's still the new kids, or I'm not going to that, that's the old group. It's like, so who do you go to? You know, and how do you find out who are the new managers, who are the new artists, who are the new producers? And it's not enough for their publicists to just reach out to you and you go through it. You actually have to go out there and feel them out and see what other aspects of stories you can drive, you know, to your publication.
We were talking about covering Whitney's death, and that network makes a big difference. I was the only guy on Billboard staff who knew how to reach the people in the early days. We were trading notes. You got him on video, man. I just got him on the phone.
We got him on video.
There's a guy by the name of Jerry Griffin.
Yep.
Anybody here of Jerry Griffin? No. Who's here? Who in this room has heard of Clive Davis? All right.
Look at that.
Jerry Griffin was the guy who brought Whitney to Clive Davis.
Oh.
All right?
Yeah.
And I knew that, and I first met Jerry in 1990, and I got to tell you, how did I find him? I found him through LinkedIn. I hadn't been in touch with him in 15 years, but I knew his story. I knew I wanted his story in our magazine about Whitney. And, you know, just used that site, just sent out a message and found him.
It's wild because we were talking about it and he mentioned Jerry. I was like, yep, we got him on camera. It's like, I wanted to make sure that we covered her in every aspect and not just, you know, all the negative things that you hear, but what about like the start, the early start? And a lot of people attribute, of course, I mean, and rightfully so, Clive Davis, but Jerry was the one that went out the first time, he just let her go.
Yeah.
Remember that? Like he was talking
Almost
about.
signed a blue note.
Yes, like, which is wild. And the second time, it was like almost a year later, he was like, that's the one, that's her, let's make this happen. And
I just had that reaction about, oh damn, because you get him on video. This goes back to your thing, Neil. There are more ways to practice this now. You used to be a radio guy like Tom, or you used to be a print guy like me, a filmmaker like Neil. Now, it's all open to you. You can do it all. I was just in a conversation on Saturday with the press secretary for Scott Stringer, the borough president of Manhattan, and she had worked on Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign and lamented when, or remembered when, stories would break over the Associated Press wire. That was like 5 years ago, and that seems like an eternity ago, because everything breaks now on Twitter.
Yep.
You know, so I was just describing how I was covering an event, I'm not going to be shy, I was at the Apollo for Bruce last Friday,
Okay.
covering it, sending out 3 different distinct Twitter feeds. My own, billboard.com, billboard.biz, then taking photos from my own personal Facebook page, then actually scribbling down, you know, an old-fashioned notebook. It's so cool now that, you know, getting Jerry Griffin is great, but getting Jerry Griffin on film is what I'm really pushing for. You know, it's the avenues that are open to you guys are greater than ever.
Can I bring up one more thing for you guys that early on in my career, and I know a lot of other people, a lot of other journalists that I'm friendly with, got their start freelancing and really established themselves over the years of freelancing. But freelancing has changed dramatically in the last few years, just because it's so across all platforms, and it's not necessarily breaking the story anymore, because it's almost impossible to break a story at this point, but getting the unique story, getting the best angle. What kind of advice can you give students here who will be coming out and maybe looking for that job, but also wanting to supplement what they're doing by freelancing and trying to establish themselves that way. What's some advice about how to break in with freelancing, the best way to work freelancing in the new reality, and what do you look for people to freelance for your publications?
Wow. Well, at least for Vibe, it's really tight. This is probably one of the worst freelance markets as far as making money that I've seen since I've been in the game. I know when I first came in around like 96, 97, it was like there were people really living. Like they could really just sit back and just write for everybody and win. And now I look at just our freelance budget that's been slashed, and you get the calls like, oh, anything else, and it's heartbreaking because you're turning away superior talent.
Yeah, you're getting vets.
Like vets,
Yeah.
like people that I look up to as far as like just their skill level and their amount of knowledge in the game. And right now, it's just so hard for them to find a spot. But there is a thirst for like the new voices, and I feel as though if you're a new voice, you're not going to get top dollar coming in unless you get the incredible scoop with a Drake or a Nicki or whatever. But there is a way that you can package your idea to make it enticing enough for the editors. And you have to understand you're going against their own sources, you're going against some of what the artist and maybe their management is packaging for the publication, and then your angle. So you're going against this green monster of a wall with your idea. You have to make sure that your idea can make it over that wall.
Are there certain columns or certain places online that's more likely for people to break in than elsewhere?
Yeah, one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is, given the caliber of publications that we represent, there aren't a lot of opportunities for people who are just breaking into freelance. I mean, the people who are freelancing have established themselves at a different level and have moved up so that they're kind of on our radar. So, I'd love to say, pitch me on this, pitch me on that. The reality is it's a budgetary issue. It's a matter of who's in line ahead of you, their level of experience. So where do you go and how do you go there? You look, again, just consume media. Just consume, websites, publications, newspapers, magazines, whatever you find out there, the throwaways. And you look within those for the short pieces. Every magazine is taste. It's got your short pieces, got your longer pieces, and study who is staff, who is not on that masthead. Try to figure out, where are they using freelancers? And then when you pitch, again, Avant Guild, part of Media Bistro, great source for information on how to pitch dozens of magazines. Figure out what sections of the magazines they use freelancers on, what approach they want freelancers to use. Do they want an email pitch? Do they want a phone pitch? Do they want a postal pitch? Who knows? You gotta kind of figure all that out before you go after it.
Yes, indeed. A lot of times with Vibe, kind of like our upfront section, shorter pieces, a little bit more punchier. We try to keep it as current as possible, but it's so hard to be current in print. I would start there. Just check out like our front page and our front section to see what kind of cool ideas that you may have. It could be an infographic. A lot of people, now they're thinking that to break into a magazine, you have to write some long story. It can be an idea that's visual, and now with all these different programs that's available to you, if you do write a piece, how can I break this piece up into a visual type of piece? And that can work as well. And a lot of times it's a lot more fun because some people just don't want to read, it seems like now. And if you're able to get the same kind of information out in a different way, that can help.
It's also important to be versatile. If you get on somebody's radar, it's good to be ready with stuff because, and I don't mean ready with your own ideas, I mean be versatile in the sense that like, you may be pitching an editor, over and over again on your Duran Duran story that you want to write. this actually happened to me, that's why I think. But at the end of the day, what he's going to come back to you is like, I got a Spider-Man piece I want to do, this 200 words, can you do that? If you can't do it, then he's not going to call you the next time. That's important, just to be ready. And the other, and here's the thing, I personally don't freelance that much anymore. I get a lot of my work mostly from Essence, just because the Essence editor and I go back. Yeah, it's a good friendship. I've known Corey forever. Yeah, Corey. So I get a lot of entertainment stories, and she knows that I did entertainment stuff, and that I can have a business conversation with a publicist or whatever. I think it's part of the reason I don't freelance that much anymore is because, and this is probably kind of counter to the notion of this panel, but the nature in which I want to tell stories has changed a little bit, and I've sort of grown out of that. I've grown out of the standard journalism approach. And I only say that to ask you this. This is very important. It sounds like a lot of people here want to do like music writing and to write about their business and, Nicki Minaj is awesome and blah, 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 blah. It's important to think about like why you want to do that. Like if it's because you really want to hang out with musicians, you should be a publicist. Like it's a different job. And a lot of people fell away from the job because they were into the lifestyle. We had a lot of perks coming up, like a lot of parties, a lot of trips, a lot of things, a lot of stuff happened. The industry is not like that anymore. It's pared down. So if you're in it for anything other than you really like telling stories, you should be doing something else. That's not what the job is about.
So to your point about being critical, there used to be a motto up on the wall of my newspaper office at my university that the first purpose of journalism is to piss people off. And I don't know, the point is, say something that nobody else is saying. I mean, it's real easy to say, God, this is just various things in sliced bread, but, be critical.
Like right now, one of the critical things that, I don't think we're catching heat for it, but it was just kind of eye-opening. In this particular issue, Drake kind of go at him for kind of reneging on the cover. And not necessarily not wanting the cover, but wanting...
You too, huh?
Yeah. Because he's done it with Complex magazine. Anybody know Complex? Mm-hmm. Like he got to their photo shoot and was like, I don't like that shirt. I'm not doing this. It was like people still do this? Like serious? So that happened with Complex, and we knew we were up next, so, we're not thinking, that was like, please. Does the same thing. I don't like that bubble coat. It's like, what? So he ended up leaving, and there was a little bit of talk about, would we talk about him leaving? And we talk about him leaving, and we kind of take him to task for it. But not just because he did that, but just the overall feel of why artists at this point feel like their image is their image, and I don't have to conform to whatever you may want me to wear, or even the theme. So are we right? Are we right or wrong? Who knows? But we're just putting the story out there and being critical on both sides. It's kind of crazy because now it's like, well, do you think we're going to get him again? Who knows? But we have to get that story out. And if you don't take the chance to get that story out, I think you're doing a disservice.
Somebody, either us or you or somebody's got to write the story of what's going on inside that camp.
Yeah, camp. Wow.
Did you hear that story idea?
Oh, there it is.
And it won't always be that. It won't always be like there are some instances in which you may have an opinion, and your editors want you to go easy. I mean, when Kanye West was breaking and stuff, I gave one album a low review. I was a music critic for EW for a little while too. I did a lot of things at EW, but I was a music critic for like a year maybe. And I remember at one point I was like, I don't like this record, whatever it was. But it wasn't like a low, it was like a B. It was like a B, right, which is like an average. And he called, and my editor was like, why would you give Kanye West a B? Because you hired me to do this. Like, I say stuff about how I feel about this. I mean, I gave it the full listen. I took it home. I ate wings, which was my process back then. I used to get like a 6-pack of Corona and wings, and I listened to the record like 5 times.
This works.
That was my process. But yeah, but it won't. Sometimes it's your imperative.
Go.
Hi. I was wondering.
John, tell your name.
Oh, my name is John Bruno. President of the New York Broadcast Team.
It's a great name.
God help those
Great
who hype
strong,
themselves.
strong name. That's the editor's name. Mr. Bruno.
Now, I was wondering, of course you're supposed to be quite critical of what goes on. What gets you blacklisted though? Being too critical or not being critical?
Being stupid. No,
Yeah,
really,
it
it's what
depends on who's
yeah.
blacklisting you, right?
Yeah, like now it's a little bit harder, I think,
Yeah.
because to be blacklisted, you have to have an industry where there's not that many opportunities for you to get in. They're controlling it this way. Now it's like you get blacklisted, even as an artist. I'm going to use the artist. 50 Cent was blacklisted pretty much. He got shy, all the craziness and everything, and he was on the outside looking in. Mixtapes became his funnel, and he blew up and all of that. It's not too much that you can do now to get blacklisted, because now if you are that rebel, that crazy person, that's where the attention is going, it seems like. I mean, the things that Rihanna was probably, that she's doing now would have gotten her blacklisted before in the way that kind of Whitney did, in a way, you know, because you're one image that company is pushing, and then you're doing other things in your personal life. So she's this glowing spokesperson for all these different brands, but then she's on the beaches of Hawaii smoking weed, going crazy. That would have pulled her away before, where now it just lifts her up and more people want to know about it.
Also, I just want to, can we just like dial back the notion of critical? It's not, the job is not to simply like it. It's not to attack people or to bolster people. It's just like, only way I can think of it is the way I started. Like I felt like people weren't giving the music that I love a fair shake. They weren't talking about it in an intelligent manner. They weren't, and to me that means also being critical. Because if you just say, if you're
That's what I meant about being stupid.
yeah, if you're a hip hop fan and you become a writer and you say everything's great because you don't want anybody to talk bad about your music, you're not actually being fair to your own music, because it deserves that analysis. It deserves a good critical opinion, and that's what I'm saying. And that's what we're saying up here. It's not about like going after people or what we used to call hit pieces. It's not about that. It's just about being fair and being thorough and being analytical about the things you talk about.
By the way, early on, one of the editors that I had said something I thought was really important. And they said, revere the people that are little known and don't revere icons. Don't uphold icons. Always question the icons. Does that still hold up? Is that still, do you feel that too many people come in with a built-in preconception of having to reinforce the icons and keep them on a pedestal, and what's the danger of that?
The higher you rise, the further you fall. I think the issue often comes down to, again, I just want to clarify my remark about filthy stupid. What everybody's looking for is insight. And if you're talking about someone who's risen to the absolute peak, you gotta really understand how, why, what that responsibility is that they then have, and I do think they have a responsibility. You have to really exercise some thought, and the more you do, the more you're going to get recognized for it.
We were just talking before we came in here about how many people in here saw the Jay-Z concert last night. That was on, you guys check Raw, okay, a couple people. He's in South by Southwest, the festival out in Austin, Texas, and they had a live stream last night of his show. And that was the first time I watched it. That was the first time I saw Jay kind of off balance, during the show. The crowd wasn't as responsive. He stopped the music a lot. I was like, whoa. And I've been to almost every Jay-Z concert in the New York area and other places. And I'm a huge Jay fan outside of work. But as a critical analysis, it wasn't one of his better shows. And it was so wild. It's like watching Michael Jordan have a really bad game. And to get that kind of word out, now I haven't had a chance to do that, but that would be my analysis. And it would kind of be met with like, hey, what's wrong with you? Like, you crazy? Because of our positioning, what we represent as a brand, what he means to our brand and all of that. And you can get, some negative feedback when you go after such icons like that. Now, I personally think if you were to ask him one-on-one, what did you think of that show? He's like, oh, that was crappy.
Yeah, think about Liz. Remember Liz that Barry wrote about him? And he but didn't he compliment her? He wrote about her in his book. This is a girl that he used to know that came at him critically, and he was very cool with her about it.
Super, and it made him analyze his rhyme and put that situation into his rhyme.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes your critique can actually help an artist be creative or vent back, and you get to understand another layer of that particular artist.
In a lot of ways, when we were young, that was the goal, was we thought we were actually helping the situation by what we would say. And I think to some degree, I think as a community, we did.
You know, here's the interesting thing that any of you guys could conceivably have done. If you just have a Twitter account, you know, you can actually get directly to these people using, you know, their Twitter handle in a tweet that just says, was at Jay-Z off his game last night at South by Southwest? And just watch that
That was
go.
viral out.
Yeah, you know, just raising the...
I mean, I was just wondering, you guys, like, working at, like, Vibe, working at Billboard, do you feel, like, a need, like, at Vibe, do you feel a need to portray someone like Jay-Z or someone like Drake who, like, you said, you question whether or not to put out a story about Drake, and you say your opinion about Jay-Z, and you feel the need to sort of make your audience happy, like also like the Billboard, where you feel the need to, the artists that are on the Billboard charts and are at the top and who would be considered that top interview, if they come in and do something like that, or there is an instance where they have a bad show or anything, is there like sort of this, I don't know, feeling that you have to portray them in a light that will get them back in, or do you feel more of a need to present the story?
I don't know whether this is the way you're asking the question, but I'm going to tell you an experience that happened at Billboard that made me really proud of this brand. And I use that phrase because it's not just a magazine. We had some negative coverage of a major label artist, and that major label pulled its ads from us for months. And you know what? The story was accurate, and the editorial call was valid, and the advertiser came. We didn't blink. The advertiser came back. Now that was admittedly in a different era. You know, there are these decisions that frankly have business ramifications at a higher level that have to be weighed sometimes. You know, you've got to know you're in a business. It's a creative field, but you've got to know you're in a business. You know, understand that. But usually, if the criticism is intelligent, you know, talking what we said earlier about, you know, how you get blacklisted. You got blacklisted by being stupid. If your criticism is intelligent and valid and fair, you know, you got to go with it.
And going forward, just know where you're working, because where you guys might have a line, with Billboard is a long established publication that has a line between editorial and advertising. There are places where that line is not as solid. It's just true. It's and more and more so, I think, with the internet. More and more websites they're advertising.
I've just got to pick up because you're giving me a nice plug, but because I brought this particular issue of Billboard.
Oh yeah.
This is an ad. This is an editorial cover. Okay? Which came first? Want to guess? Go ahead. Which came first? The editorial cover came first. We decided to honor Taylor Swift as our one of the year. And that decision was made as an editorial decision. And it was after that editorial decision was made and we decided to produce this package for this woman who'd had a remarkable year, critically, commercially, every other way, that our sales department took off and ran with it. And you will see in this issue page upon page upon page of Taylor Swift editorial and page upon page of Taylor Swift advertising. It's important to know the editorial came first. It's also part of a package we call Women in Music, 40 Top Women Executives. There are ads about these executives. We picked them first, and then the sales department went off and sold them.
Well, Tom, you know, a big problem now, and we teach a class here in editing and also a class in ethics and legal issues, In the class in editing, we were talking about this last year. The big problem now in magazines and also online is the idea of doing editorials off of advertising.
Yeah,
You
sponsored.
know, and a lot of times in facing situations. And also, one of the problems is perception. Perception of, you know, not knowing which came first.
Yeah.
And I mean, how have the bylaws, how have the policies changed or evolved in dealing with just what you mentioned before, the line between editorial and advertising and perception of running editorial off of advertising?
I am specifically responsible at Billboard for special features that run in the magazine because of targeted advertising that will run with the editorial. So that's a line and an issue very close to my heart. But let me tell you, the only reason an advertiser wants to buy ads in Billboard is because of the credibility of the editorial. So if the editorial reads like a press release, if the editorial reads like a puff piece, if the editorial reads like it could be advertising copy, it's useless to them, it's worthless. So that's how we draw the line. I will tell you, I had an experience once with a special feature we were running on a major arena superstar. I mean, this guy's one of the top 10 arena acts in the world, going out on YouTube, so I'm not going to name names. And he called me up personally and said, I'm buying every ad in this magazine, you know, to support this editorial. I want to know what's going in the editorial. I said, you know what, you're not buying the editorial. I said, you're not buying the editorial. As a courtesy, because this is standard practice at a lot of major magazines in New York, or Rolling Stone, etc., we will do fact-checking readbacks, you know. But I don't do that so you can rewrite it. I do it so I get it right. And can you imagine, I mean, no joke, I spent an hour on the phone with a guy whose hourly wage is like more than, you know, I'll make in a lifetime, reading him this editorial so we got it right. I didn't change it for him, you know? But that whole ad edit line.
Been in those situations as well,
Yeah.
especially like when there's an artist or someone that's like just super, you know, it could really change the business of your publication. You want to stand your ground, but then you also want to let them know, like, oh, okay, it's nothing that's going to kill you. I'm not changing it.
No
And we've been in that, and that's only happened like maybe 2 times, at least for me personally. But it was like, this is it. You want to hear it early, but this is it. So I don't know how you're going to spin it as far as if there's anything that hurts you.
Do you guys find that holding the line on this kind of thing becomes a little trickier online because you're working across platforms now and it sort of gets a little more slippery?
We're very careful at
audio and
Billboard.com.
video?
We're very careful at Billboard.com to label stuff promotional if it is not straight
Excellent point.
editorial.
Excellent point.
But I do think it's a much trickier line online.
Yeah. Like now, in our rotator, it still might be up there. You'll see like our edit stories that it's like 5 or 6 boxes that kind of rotate, and one of the boxes is a Gillette ad. You'll see Andre 3000 smiling.
You know, this is important. Those
Like,
types of promotional pieces, though, are an opportunity for all you guys. But you know what? Ask to keep your byline off.
Yeah,
Really?
definitely.
You know, write that copy. Fine.
Could you elaborate a little on that, what
Yeah,
the image would be?
I mean, we have editorial on the website that are sponsored features. Contrary to what I'm talking about in the magazine, you know, it's essentially written for an advertiser, okay? And it's labeled that way when it runs. It's labeled promotional. But we don't use either the same writers that we use to write pure editorial, or if I do, we just don't run the byline because I don't want, and you should keep clear that your name, your brand, goes on stuff that's editorial. You know, or you may choose a different path. You may choose it. You know, I want to write publicity work. I want to do stuff for advertising. These are all legitimate avenues of writing and creativity. But be clear what your brand represents. We haven't talked a lot about that, but you know, each of us, I think, recognizes the fact that we have an individual brand, you know, and which is why at the Apollo I'm tweeting out over Billboard, I'm tweeting out over Billboard.biz, but I'm also tweeting out over Tom Duffy at Billboard.com. Great truths have all been expressed through fiction, you know, so I can't.
So can you be specific? Because I know names from the New York Times like Carr and Pogue in the media business, but maybe each of you can throw out one more idea. Hemingway, throw out one more idea for the writers to make sure they're still reading, in addition to all your homework assignments.
One of my favorite books of all time is Scarlet Letter. I just love like the whole situation. It's kind of crazy. Yeah, but the dialogue, the thought process of the characters, I just thought it was incredible. And I'm such a magazine junkie still.
No, I mean, I got a Kindle and I tried to, because you work in magazines long enough, you kind of start just reading magazines, and I was that way for years.
I was so like that.
Just on that Hemingway tip, I just read A Movable Piece, which is a book about writing. So it's about being a writer. So if you want to get started on a simple, like it's a good, he says this part where he talks about when he started going broke because he quit writing journalism, because he wanted to write fiction. And I was like, that's exactly where I am in life. I stopped making money because I stopped wanting to do journalism, and now I'm broke. So, but it's because I want to do something else. But it's like he's like, I have to push through it. He has this part of, you know, it's a whole section about how starving makes you a better writer, which I don't want to find out whether that's true or not. But you know, it's just sort of an interesting, like, it's an interesting, like, story about writing.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Can you just repeat the title?
A movable piece. A movable piece.
This is a story about networking, inspiration, fiction, and I wish I had this letter that I could have brought it with me. When I was a young journalist, I wrote an old-fashioned print letter in the Post with a stamp on it and everything to a New York writer by the name of Pete Hamill. And I was looking for a copy of a book of his collected journalism, the title of which came from a description Spiro Agnew made of the writings of Pete Hamill. It was called Irrational Ravings. I always liked that. So Pete Hamill wrote me back. Couldn't believe it. Said, I don't know where you can get a copy of this book. It's out of print. I've only got a couple copies myself. But, and he proceeded to do this like letter to a young journalist. Read Chekhov, read Hemingway, read Steinbeck, you know, all this stuff. And I did. And I did it, you know. You said, you know, who am I reading now? Quick plug. Young writer named Leila Cobo, Leila Cobo. She's just published her second novel. She is a Colombian writer, now living in the U.S. Popular fiction, but just kind of a little bit more insightful than most. One of the reasons I give you a plug is because I think she's a great emerging fiction writer. She's the Latin editor of this magazine. Where the hell she gets the time to write fiction, I have no idea. But it's fascinating to me to watch somebody who's made their career in nonfiction. And I read volumes of history. You know, I read David McCullough. I read, you know, I just read a lot that's got nothing to do with music. You know, get outside your circle. You know, if everybody you know is doing this, go over there and do that.
And there are other jobs, by the way. I mean, there are other parts of journalism. Like if there's, like me and my wife would just say, my wife is actually she is the editor-in-chief of Essence.com. So probably the highest ranking African American woman in Time Warner on the digital side. So we were talking the other day, both like lamenting the fact that we didn't do food journalism because it seems like it would be fun. So I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of like if you love Nicki Minaj, but you also kind of like anything else, you should explore like the other options. You know, because like she's looking for a blogger right now, but she has an entertainment blogger, and she's scouring the internet trying to find a woman, probably a black woman, who writes for Essence, who can do other things. And if you were that person, it would not be that hard to reach her. You know what I mean? So like there are other like there are food journalists. There's the guy who started a hamburger blog. Like if you know you want to do this, but there's other stuff that you might be interested in just as much as you're interested in music, it might be something worth exploring.
one of the problems with the web is you tend to kind of go down a rabbit hole of your interests. Now, I happen to be a great believer, both in terms of discovering music and discovering other things in serendipity. You know, when there were things like the CMJ convention, you know, the New Music Seminar back in the day. Yeah, or even I have avoided South by Southwest for years, but if I were to go, I would not go with a plan. Because there's just something about just stumbling into someplace and discovering something you didn't expect to find. And I'm going to give a real old-fashioned, the greatest piece of serendipity in my life every day is the daily newspaper. And the reason is that I'm just turning the page and I'm reading about stuff that, you know, and if I were on a given website, just the nature of that website would often define what information I'm consuming.
Simone?
Yeah, I have kind of like two questions. The first one is like, where do up-and-coming artists fit in the market nowadays? Because there's not much of a like label presence anymore.
Thank God.
It's more or less in the I feel the same way, but it's more or less views. You know, did you pay for your World Star video, or you know what I mean, that type of thing. So, how do up-and-coming artists become relevant enough for a writer or an editor to feel like it's worth publishing?
That's you could have saw spot.
Yeah, like that's definitely like right up my alley. I'm the new artist spotlight guy, especially on hip hop. There was a case in point now. There's this young woman by the name of Mara Herb Reed. I don't even know how to say her last name. She's out of Oakland, California. She's doing like kind of Jill Scottish, but she did like this incredible cover of Send It On by D'Angelo. And I found her in our Tumblr timeline while I was updating our Vibe Tumblr, which is what I still do, which is wild. But I was going through and I was like, wow, I was struck by her cover. And it was just by having, I guess I was like one of her friends that we happened to follow, and it was just the right time, and I happened to see it. But I found her on Tumblr. I don't go to Tumblr on our timeline to find new music. You know, it just happened to be there. People are just exchanging all this new, you know, entertainment. But to get to me directly, a lot of times it's by promoters, a lot of PR people. But I do a lot of searching on my own. Like I just take time and I just go, like you said, it's like a rabbit hole. I'll just go. It'll be like 2 hours and I come up and I'm like, oh, wow, I have like 4 new artists that I have to check their full-length pieces. I'm pretty well connected as far as like people wanting to bring music to me. A lot of times I'm on the street and I get CDs and stuff. I rarely listen to those, whereas before I used to listen to them all the time. It's just timing. But since I'm online so much, it's easy for me to hit a link. And it's hard for me to load a CD and dedicate time, which is weird. But I would say to really just start getting those links out. SoundCloud, definitely, you know, post up there. YouTube, of course. It's just keep hitting.
Are you speaking from the artist perspective or from someone who wants to do more of that stuff?
Well, I've been kind of caught up in PR. You know, when I say caught up, because I initially came into it trying to do journalism. But being out there, it's like you find avenues that would be more lucrative for one, and also that gets you better connections.
Yeah.
So it's like
It gives you better connections, but if you make those connections, finding your way back into journalism is difficult.
yeah, it's been difficult.
Who needs to find your way back in?
And also, the other way is to look at it is once you get out, thank God. You know, like, you can look at it that way too if you
But
want.
it's like when someone like, which really happened to me, I just went full force and I ended up getting Raekwon to like request me to do a discography for him, like out of clear blue. And once I started to work on this, it's like one thing led to another thing, and it became hard for me to find my way back to journalism. So it's like.
So right now, are you looking to get artists? You're looking to work with artists more to tell their stories.
Written down.
And that's
Okay.
fine. That's, you know, that's absolutely fine. I mean, obviously, we're on one side of it. You're a writer the same way I'm a writer. You know, I've got great respect for people who, you know, do publicity, who do creative, who do advertising. It's all storytelling. In fact, Surefire Media is run by a woman who came out of Columbia Records 20 years ago. And they happen to have a job listing up on Media Bistro for a new young publicist. And the description described how you need to really write well. And that was on my mind when I got an email through from one of her young publicists. And this pitch email, which I did in fact open, was so well written from its subject line to the body. It had links in it that I could get right there. And I clicked them back. I said, Chris, you know, I can't go to this show, but I'm copying the boss here because this is a perfect example of a perfect pitch email. And, you know, which is to say,
Yeah, I'm about to say, those are rare.
different type of, you know, she's a good shot. Just about artists getting out there, the old model, which I've seen, you know, young act tries to get a record deal because once they've got a record deal, somebody else will take care of promotion, marketing, video, publicity, all the rest. I don't think it's a bad thing now that a young artist says, I don't need a record deal. I'm going to do it all myself. And with, people I know. I have a young musician friend of mine who wanted to do their first national tour to coincide with a booking down at South by Southwest a year ago. Basically tour the country to get down to Austin. How'd they get the funding? Not through record company tour support, Kickstarter.
Yep.
You guys all know it?
Kickstarter.
Kickstarter is an amazing crowdsourcing fundraising mechanism that is used for a lot of different things, but it is an extremely important for young artists trying to figure out ways to raise money.
Super cool. If you have an idea for anything pretty much and you need funding, you can put a timetable on how much time you want to reach a goal of $5,000 or $500,000.
Do you know PE's last album was Kickstarter?
Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Really?
it's crowdsourced funds. It's
That's-
Public Enemy's last album, which was only about 2 or 3 years ago, right?
That's wild.
Also, if you're a journalist championing somebody, I don't know if it still works that way, but when you
Get
people,
somebody and you're like, this is the person.
like Karamonica and Paul Barming or
So
something.
I've been that with Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, if you're a journalist and you believe in something and you think it's a story, and you get behind it, sometimes I think, right, editors will recognize that
That's-
you're supporting this person for a reason, or not supporting them in the sense that you're a groupie, but you
You just want to let the people know
yeah.
that you're that serious about it. Like that happened to me. It was summer of 2010. We were in a Vibe Edit meeting. There's a new artist named Kendrick Lamar. He just signed with Dr. Dre actually. But in 2010 and something, I was like, Kendrick Lamar on Twitter. Kendrick Lamar is the best rapper on the planet at 7-something right now.
Yeah.
And my staff thought I was crazy. I sent the tweet out. It was funny, maybe a couple of months ago, people started talking about me doing that tweet now that Kendrick Lamar is this big deal. So if you get in early, you kind of have like that sense that this person is there and you champion someone that you feel has that, you do get recognized.
Yeah.
I want to tell a version of this story, and I don't know if it's going to register at all because it comes from a totally different century, no joke. The editor-in-chief of Billboard, years ago, was a guy by the name of Tim White, brilliant genius, walked into a record store, asked like the 17-year-old clerk, what's selling? Guy goes, I cannot keep like the white label from this band on the shelf. It's just flying off. Billboard magazine had the first cover story in the country on Nirvana because he just had his ear to the ground, just talking.
Guys, one of the things that several of our students are running into now, the last thing that they do as a capstone if you're a major is do field work, for credit and supervised field work. And a lot of them are working at places like the Amsterdam News or the Network Journal, which is a black business magazine, and places like that. They're getting a lot of press releases that are pushing stories to them, and they're getting assigned stories sometimes off of these press releases. How much do you take from a press release? Where must you immediately make a departure from the press release? Where is the value? Where is the danger sign?
There's an immediate defiance.
You know what I mean?
When it comes to
Where are the danger signs? What can you take from it? How much can you actually?
When it was music, I didn't even read them.
That's
I
so
didn't read
true.
press releases when I was doing music. I didn't even read them. Like, what was it?
You can't tell me more than I probably need.
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of pointless. I mean,
Which is weird. But
yeah, it's like, I guess if you, it's valuable in knowing about the thing. Like okay, this exists, but then there's very little that you can trust from the press.
I'm going to be more forgiving, all right? There's another mantra that used to be on the journalism office wall at my college. Journalism is a game of time and space. The only guarantee is you're never going to have enough of either. You know? It all depends on whether the editor hands you the press release and says, I need this rewritten in 15 minutes to put it into print, in which you do what you can with it. You know, you may not have the chance to verify the facts, whatever. It's time and the space. What do you have? He goes, you know, can you take this press release and work me up a feature in 2 days? One of the things I urge you to do is always try to find the second or third voice or source that will make that a legitimate story. One of the first things I did when I started running features at Billboard was everybody wanted to do a phoner with the artist and write the story. You know, it ain't enough. I mean, you want to talk to the second or the third or fourth, depending on how much time and space you have, who can bring that story to life and figure out what is not in the press release that I can go find.
what he's saying is so true, and it's a little different spin on that same process now. I mentioned Joey Badass, the guy with the crazy name.
You better get him into print.
I'm
I'm
trying to grab him up. I recently, since I like his music so much, I went through his Tumblr, I went through his Twitter, and then I checked some of the support that he's gotten as far as like his crew, and I also checked out his fans. And I wanted to see what people were saying about him. I wanted to see what he was saying about himself, and then I wanted to see what his crew was saying about him and how they looked to him as like kind of the leader. And it was a good way of kind of getting a little ecosystem on this new kid. The press release probably wouldn't be able to give me all of that, or give me the kind of insight that I now know he loves, you know, Jordans or whatever. The press release isn't going to say those type of things, or what he's willing to do to get those sneakers and talk about them and whatever the case may be, because that could be another angle now. Because now I know he's also into design.
Yeah.
So those are things that probably won't pop up into the press release.
Just think about it this way.
Digging
The person that wrote the press release has different priorities than you as the writer of the story. That's the biggest deal. It's like the person with the press release may not believe that his love of design is interesting.
Yep.
And it's your job to find out that that's the case and to find out what's interesting about that.
And that's that other voice.
Yeah.
I'm going to give away a story idea because I may not get to it, but if I were going to do a story on this woman right now, personally, I edited this whole magazine, but I didn't do the story myself. I'd pitch it to a parenting magazine, and I'd talk to her mom and dad about what it was like to have this 14-year-old, so that's about how old she was, 14 or 15, who was so damn determined. You sold the family home and moved to Nashville because you believed in your teenage daughter. You know, I mean, what's it like from a parent's standpoint to have to go through that?
And that's the angle on the pitch.
Yeah.
And that's on the story that's out already.
Yeah. And be prepared to have creative ideas like that shot down a lot. And then somebody smart.
You know, this would probably happen to you guys. I went through about 5 edits of a piece at USA Today, and the editor and I just didn't see eye to eye on where this piece was going. And finally, I just pulled it, and it was published 2 weeks later in the LA Times. You know, and just, you know.
Definitely had tough edits. They definitely had some tough edits. One of the toughest was like really early in my career at Double XL, and it was with an artist that I wanted to do the story on, Source Money. He was Jay-Z's, like one of Jay-Z's brothers. He was a homeboys back in the day. And Sheena Lester, who was a great live editor and then became editor at Double XL. We did that edit over the phone for like an hour and a half. And it was 300 words. And she just wanted it to be a certain way. And she wasn't like letting me out. She wasn't letting me wiggle out, give like, rim sentences or anything. And it was such a defining moment for me because I was learning, but I was also frustrated that I knew the next one I wasn't going through that. And it didn't happen. Like I learned immediately, kind of first style. Also, what I needed to cut, what I needed to add. Because in a 300-word piece, you don't have that much time or space to
This is the
get
great thing
that
about
story
Twitter.
out.
I don't know how many of you guys use Twitter that often, but the cool thing is people are learning to express themselves so
Oh
concisely.
man,
Yeah.
like mom.
And that's one of the things that's funny that we sort of teach here that's hard for them to understand is that writing short and writing really well is much more difficult than
Oh, yeah, it's a
writing long
classic.
and writing well.
Classic quote, Disraeli, sorry I wrote such a long letter. If I had more time, it would have been shorter. It's true.
Yeah, I mean, I was at City Paper, we used to do 1,600 word pieces, and I thought I was like a pimp. And then the real education I got was that spin when they were like, we let give 80 words to do this, whatever it was, album, whatever. And I was like, I couldn't stand it at first, but you get really good at it. And
Yeah.
also, just to allude to what you were saying, it wasn't the editor's fault that he went through the bad edit. We just want to be clear, being edited and learning how to respond to editing is one of the best skills you'll learn. It is one of the best things you can learn, is how to be edited and how to respond to that.
Yeah. Because I responded really badly. In high school.
I had screaming matches.
Oh, man.
Oh.
One time in high school, my English teacher just told me, art. I was like, you don't like me? Like, is this personal? Like, there's a lot of red on it. This is just ugly. You know what I mean? And got me right. And that set me up for Sheena. But even with her, it was just one of those experiences where I was like, I have to get it right. And I want to learn this process.
Yeah.
I want to be good at this art thing. Definitely.
I want to jump in because I think most of the question has been answered, but I'm hearing Tumblr, Twitter. Obviously, you need to be comfortable with blogging, how to build a blog and the features that go into a good blog, and be ready to move quickly with Facebook. But what's one more tech or digital tip you might have that is important as a freelancer and even in your film business as it starts, and at Billboard and at Vive? One tip, or have we covered it? Are those the things? Because obviously we're hammering basic reporting and writing. Get good quotes and tell your story as elegantly as possible. But one more hit on digital skills.
Look up yesterday's piece in Times. Simon, I'm trying to remember the guy's name. There's an issue out there about the whole aggregation game. And it has to do with how stuff is properly attributed so that you know what the core source is. What I guess I'm getting at is, what is the most important digital tip is knowing whether the source of the information that you're seeing online is credible. There's more junk out there than ever, and I have only recently begun to accept Wikipedia. And, it sounds real old school, but I look at what the source pages are. I'm going to look at a Wikipedia piece. It's only valid if it's well sourced, and then I'm going to go back to the original source. So I guess that is probably the most important digital tip I can offer is if you're going to use information that's out there, figure out how valid, credible it is.
Leo?
I mean, this is a little probably vague, but I would say if you're trying to do any sort of web journalism, if you can surprise somebody and you know anything about Final Cut, you're probably ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Just because people putting together, video packages, it's something that not a lot of people can do. I have Final Cut. It's hard as hell. I mean, in my mind, it's like another language, but it's also really incredibly useful if you can even do the
Are
smallest
we using
thing.
that the advanced course now?
We're using, the thing that's interesting is we're using iMovie, and as Final Cut continues to evolve, it's owned by Apple. And Final Cut's becoming more similar to iMovie.
Yeah, Apple buys things that are prosumer and makes them consumer. Like Logic, which is a program for music production, which I make beats because I'm easily distracted. Like, they bought that, and that is essentially what's the package?
GarageBand.
GarageBand is essentially a dumbed down version of Logic. That's just what they do. And it's smart, it's brilliant.
a lot of times they buy them just like Facebook does for the talent that's at the company.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what? Instead of just grabbing those 3 guys, we'll take your whole company. Let's go. And they just like Go Wild, I think it is. Like Facebook bought them up just for the talent, got rid of the company.
Here's another digital site that takes us in a different direction. Mint.com or Quicken.com or whatever. One of the things that's really core to being able to be successful and sustain this, every day, every week, every month, every year, spend less than you make. I mean, you know, it's damnably hard for all of us, but you got to figure out a way to make the numbers work.
I do not think Quicken.com would be one of the tips here at a journalist. Yeah, that's a great idea, since maybe you're freelancing, maybe you're getting not quite your ideal paycheck, X number of years out of college. So stick to your budget.
Let's take this one step further. One of the things that I think is going on with freelance now that's difficult. In my day, I was lucky I got to work for a lot of the top magazines, and I had a lot of expense money. I don't think I realized back then just how much I had, but I had a ridiculous amount of expense money to pretty much do what I wanted to do. Expense money is the first thing that got cut in the last 7 or 8 years.
Yes, indeed.
What do you recommend, and what do people working for you do to maximize whatever expense money they
Meet
have?
somebody for coffee, not for lunch.
Yep. That's the new way. That's the new way.
And it's also, obviously, technology makes it easy to meet people around the world and things like that. But what are some of the things that might not be super obvious that you can do to maximize what you can do, in getting a piece together on a budget?
Well, before, like you were saying, like we all had like really, I know you had one.
Yeah.
I know you had crazy. I had
You
one.
guys have those memories too.
Yeah, those are the glory days.
Those are the glory
Don't you
days.
hate people going on like that?
Like, the expense money was really crazy. But now, I kind of like, definitely the coffee, but events. Before, events were more networking, of course, but that's where almost everyone you need to speak to, they're going to go to the Dream show. Like last night, Dream was at SOB's, and I'm looking at Twitter. I wasn't there, I was looking at Jay-Z at home. But I'm looking at Twitter, and I'm looking at all my colleagues that are meeting with each other at the Dream show. And before it would be like everybody's just watching that, but now they're having like the side meetings that they couldn't have, the weeks prior, because everyone's budgets are really cut. If everyone had that expense money, trust, they would have been at Mr. Child's and all that stuff trying to make things happen. But now they're meeting at spots where it's a listening session for a particular artist, right outside for like 10, 15 minutes. And I also feel like a lot of business, it kind of drags on a little bit too long than it needs to. A good 10, 15 minutes.
So yeah, when you go into a situation, be incisive. Just know what you're gonna ask. Just know what the point. Try to be ready. I've seen so many people walk up to artists or the person they're trying to get information from and talk about how much they like them and fumble around the conversation. No, get at what you're trying to put down on paper.
Yeah, because you're not gonna have enough time.
You're not gonna have that chance, especially now. You're not gonna like we used to at EW. We never used to do junkets. That was how we put ourselves above it. We would never do junkets. I mean, now I'm sure, this is a valid way of meeting the artist or meeting the person, but...
And it's content now.
Yeah. So, it's just be ready when you get into that situation. There's you. I remember I interviewed Tripod Quest with 3 other interviewers at the same time. If you are in that situation, you have to get what you need out of the situation. You can't, fumble around.
This may be real nitty-gritty, but realize that, 25 cents probably of every dollar you earn as a freelancer is going to be paid to your taxes, unless you can figure out a way to get some of that back. Understand business expenses as a freelancer. Understand that cup of coffee at Starbucks is a deductible business expense if you're sitting talking to somebody for business owners. And that way you don't pay taxes.
I have mine in my pocket
This stuff is, just understand how the tax system works to your advantage if you are an independent freelancer.
Yeah. I write off my office. The room in my house that's used to write is written off in my taxes.
Any questions, guys?
Yeah.
Simone has the last question?
So we can put somebody ahead, who, Simone, go.
Okay. I know you're Frank, but
Oh, wait,
I know
front
you're
row.
also a brand.
Shy, front row, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Tron Dowd. I had a question about you. Tom had brought up personal like technology and stuff like that today. How would you guys say balancing personal blogging with professional blogging? Because like I personally have a Tumblr as well, like he had mentioned, and I try to put my pieces on there, the stuff that I do to kind of keep myself writing. How do you? But I also have personal stuff, like I'll put up a picture of an artist I like, or a video game I like, or comics and so on. So how do you balance the two? Is it good to balance it, or should you just separate the two altogether?
It's tough for me. I'm in that same space. On my Twitter feed, you'll see everything from my Instagram of my daughter pointing at the sky to a nice graffiti picture that I like. And then you'll also get a link from vibe.com. Like I kind of mix it up, but I keep a level. I have like a certain standard. I may throw out a curse or two when I get excited when the Knicks win, or if they're losing, like how they do now. But I try to keep it personal and professional at the same time, which is really tough. It's a hard balance for me. So sometimes I end up not posting as much because of that balance. Now, we also have the Vibe Twitter account, which I'll jump on here and there. That's one thing. But I try to keep my personal one. I ride the borderline between personal and business.
I think if you're building a brand, and this is where you guys all are, one of the messages of marketing is keep your message clean. I would keep it separate. That's why I was saying the Facebook, LinkedIn thing, and or two separate accounts. Figure out what works for which audience. Because I do think we have a personal realm.
JC, and then we'll go back to Simone.
Yeah, I have a question. My name is JC. Spanish is my first language, and I would like to know if the Billboard have a version in Spanish.
Billboard Español.
Because I know you have like Billboard that come in Spanish too.
Yeah, Billboard Español is our Spanish
And
website.
how can I get that? Because I would like to write in
I
Spanish.
have to be honest with you. I don't know a lot about how they feed their stuff. By the way, TW at billboard.com. TW.
That's what I came here for.
I was going to ask that.
Like, there we go.
Everyone 2 hours for that. Okay.
Sorry. TW at
You might want to use the chalkboard.
Yeah. Where's that marker?
But may I help? May I put some grease on the wheel? You just spontaneously mentioned a Latin American writer or editor for Billboard who might have an idea.
Yeah.
And say, oh, I happen to know the editor gatekeeper of the web in Espanol. So maybe that's the way you would first remind Tom. You talked about this, and she'd say that she's the one who was writing on her own. Precisely. Right.
Yeah, I would need to get you more information about the way in to Billboard Español. So at that.
And then we have one more question, Simone, and then we'll distribute some magazines to you.
We have copies of all their publications for you guys, and then those of you with the guts can come up and say, email address again? What day is best for a coffee? Simone. Simone, go ahead.
Just some general advice for, like, I know you are a print company, but you also are a brand, as you said earlier, and I'm sure you do, like, live or some type of streaming when it comes to interviews.
It's all multi-platform.
Yeah, what kind of advice do you have for a celebrity interview live?
I haven't been editing those directly as our web editors have. Look at what's out there. Look at length, at focus. Nobody should ever go into a video interview without a script written out ahead of time of what they're going to say. You don't wait. It's like politicians. They don't wait to answer the question that they're given. They give the answer that they want to give. It's sort of like you're just sitting there waiting for your opening to make your statement. And you have that written before you even go into the video interview. You kind of have it, and then you present it like it's just off the top of your head. It's an idea.
All right, so I'd like to first, we'll do this again in a moment, but I would like to thank our 3 guests.